It is good to be with you guys. We can't go too long without coming home to grace, and that's not just words. I mean, we mean that. This is like coming home to us. Okay, so before I tell you where to turn in your Bibles, we are going to be turning in our Bibles somewhere, but there's something I need to address here firstly, and that is, as we go to the story we're going to this morning, we're going to be fighting familiarity, okay? Because as soon as you realize where we're going, your brain is going to say to you, oh, I've heard that before 1,000 times. And so I'm going to, check out, I'm going to try out the new website, I'm going to get on. Don't do that. Don't do that. I want you to with me, resist that together this morning. So we're going to fight familiarity. We're just going to say no to that. As a matter of fact, I think it's one of the most beautiful things, about the scriptures, that you can read them 1,000 times, and each time you read them, there'll be a different layer of truth. Not a different meaning, just a different layer of truth every time. And this happened to me with this passage recently, and I'm still not over it. So, are y'all going to fight familiarity with me this morning? Okay, so turn over in your Bibles to 1 Samuel chapter 17. This is the story where a young man, David, first encounters Goliath. See what I mean? Your brain already did that. Fight that temptation. I'm sure that you've heard this story before, but maybe not. I preached a message on Jonah not too long ago, and had a 30-something-year-old guy come up to me and say, man, I'd never heard that before. And I said, the gospel preached from Jonah? And he said, no, that story about the whale. Never heard it before. Yeah, so maybe you haven't heard this story, and so it's good that you're here this morning. So here's what was going on. Israel was at war with the Philistines. David's brothers, who were older than him, had all gone up to fight. So they had gone all up to the battle, but they left David behind because David was very young and because David needed to tend the sheep. This is what he did. It was his responsibility, one of his chores, if you will, at home, one of his jobs. And so Jesse, who was David's father, told him one morning, he said, hey, I want you to take a little care package, and I want you to take it to your brothers up here who are fighting, and I want you to find out just how they're faring. Let's just check in on them, see if they're doing okay, if they need anything, and take them this little package from home with some goodies in it and all that kind of stuff. So David took the provisions that his father had given him from home there, and he made the journey up to a place called the Valley of Elah, there where the battle lines had been drawn at that particular time in that particular fight. And as soon as he got there, as soon as he walked on scene, he heard this commotion. When it was a tumult, like it was just an uproar, commotion, and he ran toward the noise, and that's when his eyes first fell on this giant named Goliath. Now, that would have been a rather foreboding sight to come up against a guy like that who was mad at you. Most historians agree that he would have been about 9.5 feet tall. That's a big boy. 9.5 feet tall. He would have probably been wearing a 30-pound helmet. That's a big hat. Spear would have been somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 pounds, just the spear. He was wearing a armored T-shirt, if you will, that they estimate weighed somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 pounds, and quite a sight to behold, a guy like that. But it wasn't how he looked as much as it was what he said that got David's attention. Goliath came out, and the scripture says there, don't miss what it says. Scripture says that Goliath came out and spoke the same words as before. Because it's not the first time that they had seen him. The first time David had seen him, but not the first time his brothers had seen him. So he comes out, and he would come out every day and mock and taunt the armies of Israel. And so it says Goliath came out and spoke the same words as before. Now, the reason he didn't speak new words is why? He didn't have to. The old ones were working just fine. What he said every time was working just fine. So that's true a lot of time about our own personal enemies, isn't it? Like old words still work on us. So there's no reason for the enemy to get creative. However, there was somebody there hearing these words for the first time, even though they were old words to everybody else. And when David heard these words, he heard them differently than every other person who was there, because when David heard what he was saying, it sort of set off a bomb in his spirit, in his soul, in his heart, in his mind. And what he had heard compelled him to respond in a way that people considered was beyond his years. But pay attention to this, because his first response was not toward Goliath. His first response was not toward the giant. Well, it was toward a giant, but not the giant who's usually the lead role in this story. Okay? Who remembers the first question David had when he encountered Goliath? A lot of people believe he said, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine?" That was his second question. First question, think about this. The first question was, everybody listening? You're not running off in familiarity there, are you? Okay, don't do that. Fight it, fight it, fight it. Listen to what he said. His first question was, "What shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine?" In other words, what's the incentive for fighting this guy? In other words, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? And the men answered, "Well, let me tell you what's in it for the man that kills the giant. 3 things, 3 great things. Number 1, great riches. A lot of money, wealth. The king's going to give to the man that kills this giant. And not only that, also severe love. Like you're going to get the king's daughter. King's going to be your father-in-law. You know what that means? So riches and prettiest girl in the country, who happens to be the daughter of the king. But wait, there's more. Not only that, but total freedom for your whole father's house. Carte blanche. That's quite a package. That's a pretty major incentive. Now, pay attention here. Here's where this is going to get unfamiliar. I don't think David asked that question for himself. I don't think David had a selfish motive when he asked that. Instead, I wish we had some way to see David's face when he was making that statement, because I think he asked that question in a tone of sarcasm. I think it was a taunt of his own hurled toward his own brothers. Now, hang with me here, because here's why. Because David knew what we need to know today, and that is the what's in it for me giant is way more dangerous to the people of God than Goliath ever could have been. Bigger threat, more dangerous. than any Philistine could have ever been. So here's what I think David saw. He could not believe that this guy who had been defying the people of God day after day after day had been coming out to do that, and nobody had done anything about it. And he's not believing what he's seeing. Do you hear what this guy is saying about us? Do you hear what this guy is saying about the people of God, the family of God? And nobody's doing anything about it. So when he asked them what the prize was, and they told him, David was saying, well, looks to me like the king needs to sweeten the pot. Looks to me like he needs to up the ante, because this carrot that he's dangling now isn't working. Y'all are talking about what a great and grand incentive and motivation and stuff this is, but nobody's doing it. What's wrong with y'all? And it was a pretty sweet carrot. I mean, a pretty sweet carrot. Riches and love and freedom. Here's the thing. Let me help you connect these dots right away. Those are the things that many of us still give our lives fighting for. Riches, security, power, love, relationships, acceptance, to not be alone, put up with things so we won't be alone, all that kind of stuff. Freedom, independence. These are things that still motivate us. But I've got some news for you this morning that I really, really, really hope you can hear. If your incentive for fighting, if you will, in this thing called life, if your incentives for fighting through life is money, love, freedom, any or all of those things, here's something you really need to know. And this is coming from somebody who's in his 6th decade now. Some opposition will arise in your life at some time that will make any and all of those things not worth fighting for. I've seen it. You've seen it. Comes a place, you just get tired. It's not worth it anymore. Here's what David was saying that we need to hear this morning. David was saying to his brothers when he's saying, y'all are focused on what's in this for me. He's saying there is a deeper motivation that y'all are missing. There's a deeper motivation. I think he was saying, let me explain to you guys before I do this. I'm going to kill that guy. But first, I'm going to say, here's the reason why I'm going to kill that guy. It's not to get off that stuff. It's not to get all that. It's not to get the riches. It's not to get the girl. It's not to get the freedom. He's threatening our identity as a people of God. He's threatening our identity as the people of God, and that has to be stopped. And right now. He can't go on another minute doing this. So as David had an underlying connection with God and with his people. David had that underlying connection, relationship, partnership with God and with his people that not only sustained him all of his life, it controlled him and corrected him. And he saw this through every battle of his life. David's identity, who he was and what he was all about and what he was for and his purpose in life was found in a community that was deeply rooted in God, which went way, 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 way beyond what he could personally get out of it. And so here is this giant threatening the welfare and the security of the people he was part of. And he wouldn't stand for it. Because David's place and David's connection and identity with his people, the people of God, held top priority in his life. and it could not be threatened. Remember, when he killed Goliath, it wasn't just a man or two that rose up to plunder the Philistines. It was every man together as one. We can't miss that. That image never left David. Just never left him. The vision, as a result of something that he just did, the vision of the people of God partnered together with God, charging into their destiny. He never got over it. That implanted something in him for the rest of his life that he never got over. Number one, it controlled him. It controlled him, governed his life. You would see it later on in his life when he had an opportunity to kill the man who was passionately trying to kill him. The king, Saul, was trying every way he could to locate David and eliminate David, to kill David. And Saul had gone into this cave, and David was already there waiting. Saul had no idea he was there. And David was sitting behind this rock where Saul was. He could have easily slit his throat and killed the man who was trying to kill him. But instead, he just quietly cut a little corner off his robe. Now, why in the world would he do that? Because remember what governed his life. Think about this. David knew Saul, even though he was trying to kill him, even though he wasn't right, he knew that Saul represented God somehow. And even though Saul was so wrong in what he was doing, David knew to fight Saul would be to fight God. And he submitted to that control and let that govern him in that situation. That's pretty incredible. But not only did it control him in all of his life, it corrected him all through his life. You remember after David had become king, he got swept up in lust for Bathsheba, and he arranged for her husband Uriah to be put on the front lines of the battle there so that he would be killed in action. That way they would say, oh, well, that's too bad, you know. So it's murder. It's premeditated murder, what he did. And he was killed, and he was killed really quickly. You know, and all you know the rest of that story. But David soon realized, with the help of the prophet, that he had forgotten that Uriah, even though he was a subordinate, was also created in the image of God and a member of his family, and therefore a representative as well. And because of that, David submitted to that correction, took his lumps. Well, and here's the good news for us. That is, y'all, Jesus made the way for us to be brought into that same kind of underlying connection, relationship, partnership with God and his people to such an extent that it will motivate, sustain, correct, and control us in everything we face in life. I hope you're hearing me this morning. You're part of something that will provide all of that for you, that will hold you in place, whatever is going on in your life. It will hold you in a place of security. It will hold you in a place of safety, in sunshine or in shadow in your life. It's been given to you. It's been gifted to you. We just need to learn to live in it. And I am really concerned that we, hang with me here, I'm really concerned that we as the people of God, particularly at this time, at this juncture in our culture and in our country. I'm really concerned that we are spending our time and our energy and our resource fighting the wrong giants. We're fighting giants out there that are sure enough giants that sure enough need to be fought. But we've got giants in here eating our lunch and nipping our heels and stealing our hearts and stealing our children and stealing our identity. That can't happen. Okay. It's a really good time in our culture and in our country to examine our motivations. It's a really good time. You may have heard me say this before. You're about to hear me say it again. I've been doing this thing for a long time now, of ministering, preaching, being, walking with the Lord, however you want to say that. I've been doing this for a long time, and I can look you right in the eye today and tell you that I have never in my life been more hopeful for the church in our country than I am right now. I have never been more hopeful. I've never had more hope, for the church in our country than I do right now, and maybe I need to tell you why. The reason I'll tell you why is that first, I believe that God is giving the church a golden opportunity right now, and the opportunity that is wide open to us as a church in our culture and country today is for the church to remember who she is and to remember why she's here. Because we've forgotten a little bit. Second reason I am so hopeful is that I believe that the current church model in our culture that has been deemed successful basically is not successful, and that it is beyond being tweaked or adjusted back into health. You say, well, why in the world does that make you hopeful? Because if that church model is beyond being tweaked or adjusted back into health, that means it's got to be reformed. And I believe with everything in my being that you and I are living in a day, we're living in initial phase, beginning, however you want to describe it, of what our great-grandchildren might call a gospel reformation in the United States. Let it be true. Church, y'all, if you haven't noticed, I know this is, you guys are, we love coming here. We love, here you guys are focused on the gospel. But church, like church in our country, if you haven't noticed, it's not changing. It's changed. Do you know now that is local, not local, I'm saying current. The most current stats that I've seen, which are from this year, from the big polls and church study people that do that stuff. That's valid. So that now a member of a church, a person considered to be a faithful member of the church, comes average once a month. And they call themselves a faithful member of the church, and the church recognizes them as a faithful member. There's a whole lot of stuff we could say about that, but anyway, that's not what I'm saying. Anyway, why I'm hopeful is I believe God is changing all that from the ground up. And if I'm right, even in a tiny way, we have some giants to attend to. And there at the head of the line, shouting and taunting and mocking us the loudest, is the what's in it for me giant. What I get out of this. You know, the church now that's deemed successful, I'll stand behind this statement. The church now that's deemed successful is largely governed by people's preferences. I mean, I could give you a little example of that. This has been some years now, but we're so conditioned into it now that it seems totally normal to us. I don't want to come to church on Sunday morning because that's the only day I get for myself. And the church, instead of providing the governance and the discipline in love and grace to help that person work through that, instead said, well, what if we have a Saturday night? Would you come then? Well, maybe. Okay, well, we'll have a Saturday night. I don't like to sing hymns. Well, maybe we could, we'll sing songs off the wall. We'll put them on a transparency and we can sing praise choruses. Okay, well, I'll come if you'll do that. And then some older people go, well, I like to sing hymns. If they're going to be that way about it, well, no, that's a problem. Well, we'll have a hymn service, and then we'll have... Are you with me? Like, this is what we've done. This is what we've done. I could go on in that, but you get the point. I'm not fussing about that. I'm just saying, take a look at the why behind that. The church today, when I'm talking about the people that go to church on Sunday, and probably some of you in this room, if you'd be honest about it and just think about it yourself, you see Sunday morning, you see Sunday morning as discretionary time that I can choose to go to church or not. Right? This is what we've created, and that church model, who is based on success being about numbers and and all that kind of stuff. You have to do that. You have to do that. Here, let me just say this and move off of it because I don't want to belabor this point. We'll just say this. We have successfully, even unwittingly maybe, but what has happened as a result of all that is that we have turned the congregations of our country into congregations full of spectators, not participants. So you come to church expecting everything to be done for you. We'll do all of this stuff for you. All we want you to do, we just want you to come in. We want you to be here every Sunday. We want you to give you money. We want you to play nice and be good to each other. And then get out of here when the service is over. We got everything else. If you don't play, like if you just come and do that, quality control is much easier to manage. Y'all are not designed to be spectators. Church is not a spectator. It needs to be participants. You have a role even in being here on Sunday morning to walk in here. Dutch Reform, I love this about the Dutch Reform. They have a saying in their churches that the preacher says to them and they say back to the preacher. And it's just like a habit thing they have. But he says, you pray me full and I'll preach you full. And the congregation will say to them, you preach us full and we'll pray you full. You have a responsibility when you come in to listen to a sermon. Like you're part of it. You're part of what pulls that out of your pastor. Do you know that the New Testament says, when you get together, come with something. Come with something to give. Well, don't shout me down. That's what it says. Bring a psalm, bring a hymn, bring a smile, bring a word of encouragement. Come in that door with something to give somebody. Participate. Don't spectate. This is an opportunity that we get. But we come in because we've been conditioned to come here. And preachers, and especially young preachers, they're being conditioned out. Listen, think about this. We've been conditioned to come in and sit down here and hear a preacher preach to a room of individuals, not to a family. Right? So mainly you've been conditioned. I'm not fussing at you. I'm just saying you've just grown up in this like all of us have. Like, does a fish know it's wet? I'm just saying pay attention, be aware of where we are. Because more than likely we all come in here, and here's why we come in here. You're not selfish, you're loving people, you're great people. We love you, you love Jesus. I know all that. I'm not fussing at you. I'm just telling you that we've all been conditioned to come in here and sit down. And my motive for being here is, what can I get out of this week that's going to help me through my week? I don't come in thinking, I'm in there and I'm going to encourage somebody. I'm going to pray for somebody. I'm coming to give. I'm not coming to get. You with me? Okay. I'll move on then. We live in a world that's governed by personal preference. If you have looking around that now, I can't get into that. It goes outside the church, doesn't it? Like whatever I prefer to be, I can be that. And the more dangerous thing that is now, then you have to recognize me for what I prefer to be. I mean, I don't need to tell you how ludicrous that it's gotten. For real. I mean, we could look at each other and say, you're making it up. I ain't making that up. I'm a 6'2", built out muscle dude, and I decide I want to be a girl on the swimming team. So I can win and we all have to go, okay. So you're a girl on the swim? Personal preference. Now, here's where it gets tricky for us. Because freedom, it was for freedom that I set you free. Freedom allows for personal preference. See, God's into the kind of freedom where he's not going to, give you the freedom and then I don't have time then. This is a big reason why it sneaks up and takes over us. Because we live in a country, number one, we live in a country where we are free for the most part to do what we want to do, when we want to do it, the way we want to do it. And I love that as much as you do. However, I will remind you, and I feel like I should remind you this morning, that being American is not our primary identity. You really have to hear me. I'm not anti-American. I love this country. Our son served the military. I love this country. However, my primary citizenship and identity isn't here. There is another kingdom. There is another kingdom that must control and correct my life besides this one. It must. And this kingdom, y'all, is one of ultimate freedom. But it's the kind of freedom that offers you something infinitely more fulfilling than personal preference could ever do. It's a paradox. It's a paradox. At first glance, it's absurd. At first glance, it's contradictory. But yet, it works. It works. The better freedom comes by being released from the prison of personal preference and released to the joy of preferring one another. The paradox. In the 12th chapter of the book of Romans, such amazing. Paul is describing there what a worshipful life looks like. He reminds us that when we come to the Lord, we no longer come to offer the old man for sacrifice, but the new man for service. When you come, when you present your bodies to the Lord, present yourself to the Lord holy and acceptable. Okay? That's the new man. That's not the old man. He goes on then to tell us how God has graced each one of us with differing gifts, with a measure of faith. He's given each one of us an assignment that requires different tools, different equipping, all of that kind of stuff. And then in finding the places where we fit and function as participants in the body of Christ, where we all have roles, and finding those and filling those roles will bring the kind of fulfillment that he longs for us to have as his children. And he gives a few examples there in Romans 12 there, such as there are folks called to serve that are assigned, gifted especially, to serve, to lead, some to teach, others to give generously. But then he circles back around. I love this. He circles back around there to tell us no matter what your distinctive gifts, assignments, calls, jobs, roles might be, no matter what those distinctive things might be, they all flourish in the same, in the very same atmosphere of deep, genuine love. That's where they all flourish. That's where they all come together. That's where they all work together, is in this atmosphere of love. I love how the old King James says this verse. He says, and here's his instruction after all of that, of all those giftings. He said, be kindly affectioned to one another in brotherly love. Be kindly affectioned to one another in brotherly love, and in honor, preferring one another. Preferring one another. We don't do that very much. It's supposed to be the hallmark of a disciple that I don't live for myself. I live for you. I don't live for what's in it for me. I give myself because what's in it for you. Very un-American. John Stott wrote this book called The Living Church. And he's discussing in this book kind of the practical consequences of this sort of preferring one another. There's a negative side and a positive side, he says. And I wrote this quote down. So he says, negatively, if we love each other, we will not stand in judgment on each other or speak evil against each other. We will not bite or devour each other as if we were beasts. We will not provoke or envy or lie to each other. Positively, if we love each other, we will be kind and compassionate to each other. We will forbear and forgive each other. We will submit to each other. We will build each other up. We will practice hospitality to each other ungrudgingly. We will encourage each other, admonish and comfort each other, pray for each other, and bear each other's burdens. And who would like to go to church there? You realize he's describing a church. He's describing a people. He's describing the identity of the people of God. And we live and breathe and live in the water every day that is totally anti all of that. Are you hearing me? Hear what I'm saying? Like if you're hearing me fuss, I'm not doing a good job. I'm not fussing. I'm wanting you to be hopeful. I'm wanting you to tap into who you really are. I'm wanting you to discover who God really made you to be. I want you to put a rock about that big right there in the head of the what's in it for me giant. Love to be part of a church like that. Do you know when those people get ready to come to church, he's describing here, they come looking for somebody they can practice all that on. I want to invite you to something. Next week's Easter. That's such a wonderful, wonderful time. Changed everything. Let me just challenge you. Well, no, let me go stronger than that. Let me go strong as I can. I'm gonna double dog dare you. You can't turn down a double dog dare. I don't know what'll happen to a man if he turns down a double dog dare. It's just a chicken. Here's all I'm saying. Here's all I'm asking. Next Sunday, when you pull in the parking lot, before you get out of your car, just pause 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and say, Lord, would you give me something for somebody in there today? Smile, a hug, a word, something. I mean, that's real hard, isn't it? We all do that. And we all should do that. And that's the way we prepare to come to church. I'm not coming here just to get something I can feed on, to try to keep my head above the water for one more week. I'm coming to give. I'm coming to participate. The culture, on the other hand, young or old, don't care how old or how young you are, this culture that we live in is screaming at you all day, every day, to be your own person, to choose your own path, to do what makes you happy, to be in command of your own destiny. It screams, 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 screams at you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But Jesus whispers to you, walk this way. You have been redeemed. You are different. You have been made new. The nature of God himself is in you. This is how you've been made to live. This is who you are. You have a new identity. You live differently than all these other people around you. You once were no people. Now you are my people. This is where your identity comes from. This is where your motivation for everything in life should come from. Every decision that you make, all of that kind of stuff. There are other giants. There are other legitimate giants. We could talk about them all day. I recommend you tackle this one first. I recommend you tackle this one first. And here's how you slay. Here's how you slay what's in it for me giant. You need a daily reset on your identity. You need a daily reset on your identity. All of us tend to sort of default in our sleep, like overnight. Our default button somehow defaults. It's clicked back to waking up and just starting immediately to live out of a memory of who I used to be. To live out of the memory of the old man. This is why Paul encourages us in Romans that to consciously present the new man to God every day. Every day. This is why Paul said, I die daily. It's a daily reset for me that I start my day going, I'm not who I used to be. I don't have to think like that. I don't have to act like that. I don't have to be bitter. I don't have to be jealous. I don't have to be all of those things. I can live this other way because Christ lives in me. Because he lives in me, I don't have to blow up on a guy who steps in front of me in line at the bank. Why? Because God has pinched off a piece of his patience and put it in me. You know what I'm saying? Now, if somebody cuts in front of you in traffic, we're all exempt from that. Like, I think I heard God on that. Like, but you hear what I'm saying. We don't have to act like that. We don't have to be like that. We don't have to be selfish. We don't have to be greedy. We don't have to be argumentative. We don't have to be judgmental. We don't have to be any of those things. We get to be, because of whose we are and because of who lives inside of us, we can be kind and gentle and loving and patient and peaceful and honest, gracious. We can be all of those things because that's who he made us to be, right? Okay, let me move on. I'm so close to being done. What I'm talking about here is exercising the gospel, living out the context of the gospel. We are new creations. We are new creations. We are not here for ourselves. We are not here for our wants. We are not here for our wishes. The gospel, listen, we have been so enculturated and conditioned, and we have so blended together the gospel and the American dream that we can hardly tell them apart anymore. Right? So we have expectations of one and both of those things that ain't necessarily so. But let me tell you something, just so you'll know. Let me just make this announcement. The gospel never promises anybody, the gospel never promises you that all your dreams will come true. It's way better news than that. It's way better news than that. The gospel promises you that all God's dreams for your life will come true. And that's so much better. That is so much better where we are. Matter of fact, Jesus said, think about this, Jesus said, whoever seeks to find his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. That's good. So, love each other. Be kind and compassionate to each other. Forbear and forgive each other. Submit to each other. Build up each other. Practice hospitality on each other ungrudgingly. Encourage one another. Admonish one another. Comfort one another. Pray for each other. And bear each other burdens. And watch that giant fall dead.